Hi, welcome to the first example for mean. So in example 1, the question is, find the mean from the given set of 103.75, 110.25, 112.4, 106.58, and 109.27. So in order to find mean, we first have to add up and find the total of these numbers. I want to take note that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, so 5 values. So again, we're going to find the sum of all the values. We're going to add it together. Now, if you're doing this by hand, you want to be very careful when you're adding, subtracting with decimal numbers. You do have to line them up, make sure you add them correctly. So if you notice that 4 of these numbers have 2 decimal places, so 0.75, 0.25, 0.58, and 0.27, whereas over here it only has 1 decimal. So you can rewrite this as 112.40 instead of 112.4 in terms of adding and subtracting. Like I said, you do have to line up the decimal numbers carefully in order to add or subtract. But in this case, we're going to be adding them. Now, I do want to take note is you always want to be careful when you either doing by hand or if you do have an option, use a calculator. You want to do it carefully when you're adding with decimal numbers. More specifically is make sure that you press the right numbers and the decimal in the right places. So that way you want to make sure you get the right numbers, the correct total when you're adding. So once we add, we'll have 542.25. Next, as I noted before, we're going to have 5 numbers from this set. So numbers of value is 5. So once you find the sum and number of values, you can set it up in order to find our mean. So mean will equal to 542.25 divided by 5. Now, if you do have a calculator, you can just simply calculate it right away. However, if you're going to do this by hand, you do need to set up for long division. So this is what it looks like for long division. Now, I'm going to quickly go over this for the ones who are unfamiliar with long division. If you're familiar and proficient with long division, then you can skim through this process. However, for the ones that need to review, the ones who especially needs to make sure to organize your numbers when it comes to long division. So the first part, we're going to look at the 5 from the 542. We're going to see 5, and right here the outside, which is our divisor, the 5 on the outside, we see how many times it will go into 5. So like I said, we're going to focus on the first 5. Here I would say that the 5 that's outside, also known as our divisor, can go into the highlighted 5, the yellow 5, one time. So we're going to put the 1 above the 5 here. Next, I'm going to calculate by doing 1 times 5, or I would say 5 times 1, and it'll equal to 5. Once you finish multiplying that, what you're going to do is you're going to put in the first number, the highlighted 5. So I put the green 5 underneath the yellow 5, and there we're going to subtract. Now I put parentheses because in the event if you have a negative number, that minus sign would change it. So again, the process is always put parentheses and then subtract. So we're going to subtract 5 minus 5, that's going to be 0. So after I calculate that, the next step is you bring down the next number. So after the 5, from inside the division, we're going to go over to the next number, which is 4. We're going to bring it down. So we have 0, 4, which is basically 4. So what we're going to do next is we're going to repeat the process. So I'm going to look at the 5 on the outside, my divisor, and I'm going to ask myself, how many times does 5 go into 4? It would be 0 because 5 is greater than 4. So there's going to be 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 0 above 4. But that 4 doesn't go away. That 4 is still there because we haven't messed with it, we haven't used it. So after I put the 0 above 4, we're going to go over to the next number that's inside the division, which is 2, and we're going to bring it down. So when you bring it down, so instead of 4, which we had initially, now we have 42. So looking at my divisor, 5, I would ask myself, how many times does 5 go into 42? We know that 5 can go into 42 8 times, so we're going to put 8 above the 2. And like I said, make sure that you organize your numbers so that way you can have the correct answer, especially when you're working with decimals. So we know that 5 can go into 42 8 times, so we're going to multiply. I would do 5 times 8, this is 40. So after I finish multiplying, I'm going to put 40 underneath the 42. And I'm going to subtract. So 42 minus 40, my remainder will be 2. So I'm going to keep going because I still have some more numbers. So after I subtract and have a remainder of 2, I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to bring down the 2 that's next inside the division. So instead of 2, I have 22. Now, the process is going to be the same, but one thing I want to talk about is since we have a decimal, that's the one thing you cannot forget. You want to be very careful. So if you have a decimal, so before we put the next number, we want to make sure we put a decimal in our answer because that's going to be part of it. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't go away. So if you're dividing with decimals, most likely your answer will be decimals. So here in this example, I'm dividing a decimal number by a whole number. Some cases, our answer is going to be decimal. So before moving to the next step, let's add in our decimal. So you see here it's 108, and then I put the decimal. Now I ask myself, from my divisor, the 5, how many times does 5 go into 22? And we know that 5 can go into 22 4 times. So the 2 that I brought down above it, I'm going to put 4. And then from there, I'm going to multiply 5 times 4. So 5 times 4 is 20. So next, I'm going to put the 20 underneath 22. So don't worry about the spacing. I did it so that I can line up the numbers so that you can follow through easily. So here we have 22 minus 20, and the remainder is 2. So once we have a remainder, we go to the next number that's inside the division, which is 5. And we're going to repeat the process. We're going to bring it down. So instead of what we had initially, which was 2, now we have 25 after we bring down the 5. Now next, I'm going to ask myself, from the divisor, the 5 here, how many times does 5 go into 25? We know that it's going to be 5. So above the 5 that we brought down, I'm going to put a 5 on the top. From there, I'm going to multiply 5 times 5, which will be 25. And I'm going to put 25, this green 25, underneath the blue 25, and I'm going to subtract. And when you subtract, you have a remainder of 0. So here, if I have a remainder of 0, that's where you know for sure you can stop. Now, one thing is, when you're dividing and it has the decimal number, you usually stop at 2 decimal places. If you want to be accurate, you can go up to 4 decimal places, but depending on what your teachers ask for you, in this case, I would ask for 2 decimal places. So when you're dividing with decimal, if you have to keep going until you reach 2 decimal places, okay? If you see that when you're dividing and you reach a 0 at the very end, that means that you know you can stop, okay? So when we divide 542.25 by 5, our answer is going to be 108.45. So the mean for example 1 is 108.45. All right, let's go to the next example. Example 2. So in this given word problem, it's stated, Arlie completed 2 tests with grades of 94 and 83. Arlie will take one more test and wants to achieve a test average of 90. What would the grade be for her third test? So let's analyze the given word problem. The first thing we know is for the two tests, it has a grade of 94 and 83. Now, after her third test, she wants to achieve a test average of 90. So the average, that's a key term, what we need to know or should know in order to work this out. And again, what I mentioned before is we're going to have a third test. But the question is, what would be the grade for her third test? So that means we have to look and find the grade for her third test. So, using all the information, we know that if you're using average, that means we're going to do mean, which is sum of values divided by number of values. So in terms of this given word problem, we're going to rewrite it in the parameters of the word problem, which would be, instead of mean, we're going to do test average. And instead of sum of value, we're going to do sum of tests. And then instead of number of values, we're going to do number of tests. So based on the information I highlight, all you have to do is just fill in the information that you do know. So first thing is I'm going to rewrite sum of tests. So in order to find sum of tests, you have to rewrite it as test 1 plus test 2 plus test 3. When you rewrite it, this is going to look like, so t sub 1, which is test 1, plus t sub 2, which is test 2, plus t sub 3, which is test 3. Now, if you had a question, how did I get this? Okay, one is we're doing sum of tests. So when we're doing sum, most of the time, we'll be adding. So it says sum of tests. So basically, we're going to add in the grades from test 1, test 2, test 3. Now, again, even though we don't know the grade for test 3, this is where we have to set it up. For test average, we put in 90 because that's given in the word problem. For number of tests, that's 3 because that's what we do know from the word problem. The first test was 94, the second test is 83, the third test is unknown. So now we're just going to put in 94 for t sub 1 and 83 for t sub 2, and it will look like this. Alright, so this is the formula from mean, and now we're going to work this out in order to find the value, the grade for test 3. So now we're going to talk about the process. So it's 90 equal the fraction of 94 plus 83 plus test 3 divided by 3. Now when we have a fraction, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by the denominator, which is 3. So I multiply the left side by 3 and the right side by 3. Now, I want to talk about this because I want to clear the misconception. Now, I'm multiplying the 3 to a fraction, so when you have a whole number multiplying a fraction, basically you multiply the whole number to the numerator. Now, everything stays the same except the only difference is the blue 3 is in the numerator. And what's also different is I put parentheses on 94 plus 83 plus t sub 3 because they go together. Don't worry about the parentheses, they will go away in a moment. I just want to talk about this misconception. Now, the reason I want to go over this is because since this whole group, 94 plus 83 plus t sub 3 is one group, the second part is the blue 3, they're multiplying. If they're multiplying, I can simplify my fraction. I have a 3 in the numerator and a 3 in the denominator. What's going to happen is I'm going to divide, and that will become 1. So the misconception I want to talk about is people say that these 3 will cancel out. You want to be extra careful on the term cancel out. Cancel out means that two numbers, when you combine them, will equal to 0, meaning that when you add them together, when you subtract them together, and if you say they cancel out, then they should equal to 0. However, where I circle, basically what we did is we divide the blue 3 by the black 3, or I should say the 3 in the numerator by the 3 in the denominator. When you divide them, they will become 1. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I don't say, or I did not say that the 3 cancel out. All I said was the 3 from the numerator divided by the 3 in the denominator will become 1. So it will divide into 1. Now, when you multiply the 1 to what's inside the parenthesis, 94 plus 83 plus t sub 3, when you multiply by 1, it stays the same, and the parenthesis goes away. So it didn't really change. So that's all that happened is when you multiply both sides by the denominator of the fraction, what happened is, as you can see here in the example, 3 divided by 3 become 1. 1 multiplied to whatever you have in the numerator, that's what you're going to have. So 94 plus 83 plus t sub 3. So again, I did not say that the 3 cancel out. It's just simply divide, simplify into 1. And then if it's multiplied by 1, then you're just left with your numerator. So after I simplify the right side, the next part is we're going to simplify the left side. So 3 times 90 will be 270. So we have 270 equals 94 plus 83 plus t sub 3. So to make this problem simple, easier for the next step is we're going to combine 94 and 83. When I combine them, that will be 177. So to solve for t sub 3, we're going to subtract 177 to both sides to find the value of t sub 3. So when I subtract 177 to both sides of the equal sign, I want to have 93 on the left side, and it will equal to t sub 3. So the grade for Arlie's third test, it has to be a 93. So again, she would need at least a 93 or above on her third test to have an average of 90. So again, this is the process if you need to find the value of a missing value or missing element or missing number. And this is an application for mean. So make sure to be familiar with this process. It's the same process you can follow through if you have whatever number of values, number of elements, number of, in this case, tests. So if you have, you can do the same process for 4 tests, 10 tests, 20 tests, or again, for any type of problems with unlimited elements, unlimited values. So you can do the same process for 100 values, and it will give you the correct answer for the missing variable that you're looking for.